Hey everybody, welcome back to Biblio Bibbly and Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix.
Trifecta.
We're almost to the end. Reason to be excited. Last time,
Jackson's mad at me because Bailey's on my lap.
it happens. Sorry, it happens.
Last time, Hermione led Umbridge straight into the Centaur's grasp, and then just let Umbridge's racist ways talk her into being taken away by them. And Grop did show up. Not in the way I was expecting, but it was nice. And saved their butts.
Mm-hmm.
And now everyone decided they're flying to London on the back of Thestrals.
And Ginny, Luna, and Neville are coming, no matter what Harry says.
Exactly.
Kudos to Luna for the idea for the Thestrals, too.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could leave Ginny behind, but that's about it. Neville and Luna can see the Thestrals. They could just leave Ginny and she'd just be kind of wandering around, feeling things out.
Trying to find them. That would be mean.
Is that a wing? I swear that was a wing. Get back here, you bastard.
So without further ado, let's see what happens. Chapter 34. The Department of Mysteries. Harry wound his hand tightly into the mane of the nearest Thestral, placed a foot on a stump nearby, and scrambled clumsily onto the horse's silken back. It did not object, but twisted its head round, fangs bared, and attempted to continue its eager licking of his robes. He found there was a way of lodging his knees behind the wing joints that made him feel more secure, then looked round at the others. Neville had heaved himself over the back of the next Thestral, and was now attempting to swing one short leg over the creature's back. Luna was already in place, sitting side-saddle and adjusting her robes as though she did this every day. Ron, Hermione, and Ginny, however, were still standing motionless on the spot, open-mouthed and staring. "What?" he said. "How are we supposed to get on?" said Ron faintly. "We can't see these things." "Oh, it's easy," said Luna, sliding obligingly from her Thestral and marching over to him, Hermione, and Ginny. "Come here." She pulled them over to the other Thestrals standing around, and one by one managed to help them onto the back of their mount. All of them looked extremely nervous as she wound their hands into their horse's mane and told them to grip tightly before she got back on her own steed. "This is mad," Ron murmured, moving his free hand gingerly up and down his horse's neck. "Mad. If I could just see it." "You better hope it stays invisible," said Harry darkly. "We all ready, then?" They all nodded, and he saw 5 pairs of knees tighten beneath their robes. "Okay." He looked down at the back of his Thestral's glossy black head and swallowed. "Ministry of Magic, Visitors' Entrance, London, then," he said uncertainly. If you know where to go." For a moment Harry's Thestral did nothing at all. Then, with a sweeping movement that nearly unseated him, the wings on either side extended, the horse crouched lowly, then rocketed upwards so fast and so steeply Harry had to clench his arms and legs tightly around the horse to avoid sliding backwards over its bony rump. He closed his eyes and pressed his face down into the horse's silky mane as they burst through the topmost branches of the trees and soared out into a blood-red sunset. Harry did not think he'd ever moved so fast. The Thestral streaked over the castle, its wide wings hardly beating. The cooling air was slapping Harry's face, eyes screwed up against rushing wind. He looked round and saw his 5 fellows soaring along behind him, each of them bent as low as possible into the neck of their Thestral to protect themselves from his slipstream. They were over the Hogwarts grounds. They'd passed Hogsmeade. Harry could see mountains and gullies below them. As the daylight began to fall, Harry saw small collections of lights as they passed over more villages, then a winding road on which a single car was beating its way home through the hills. "This is bizarre!" Harry barely heard Ron yell from somewhere behind him. He imagined how it must feel to be speeding along at this height, with no visible means of support. Twilight fell. The sky was turning on a light dusky purple littered with silver stars, and soon only the lights of Muggle towns gave them any clue of how far from the ground they were, or how fast they were travelling. Harry's arms were wrapped tightly around his horse's neck as he willed it to go even faster. How much time had elapsed since he'd seen Sirius lying in the Department of Mysteries? How much longer would Sirius be able to resist Voldemort? All he knew for sure was that his godfather had neither done as Voldemort wanted, nor died, for he was convinced that either outcome would have caused him to feel Voldemort's jubilation or fury course through his own body, making his scar sear as painfully as it had on the night Mr. Weasley was attacked. On they flew through the gathering darkness. Harry's face felt stiff and cold, his legs numb from gripping the Thestral's side so tightly, but he did not dare shift his position lest he slip. He was deaf from the thundering rush of air in his ears, and his mouth was dry and frozen from the night cold. He'd lost all sense of how far they'd come. All his faith was in this beast beneath him, still streaking purposefully through the night, barely flapping its wings as it sped onwards. If they were too late. He's alive, he's still fighting it, I can feel it. If Voldemort decided Sirius was not going to crack, I'd know. Harry's stomach gave a jolt. The Thestral's head was suddenly pointing toward the ground, and he actually slid forward a few inches along its neck. They were descending at last. He thought he heard a shriek behind him and twisted round dangerously, but he could see no sign of a falling body. Presumably they'd all received a shock from the change of direction, just as he had. And now bright orange lights were growing larger and rounder on all sides. They could see the tops of buildings, streams of headlights like luminous insect eyes, squares of pale yellow that were windows. Quite suddenly it seemed they were hurtling toward the pavement. Harry gripped the Thestral with every last ounce of his strength, braced for a sudden impact, but the horse touched the ground as lightly as a shadow, and Harry slid from its back, looking round at the street where the overflowing skip still stood a short way away from the vandalized telephone booth, both drained of colour in the flat orange glare of the streetlights. Ron landed a short way off and toppled immediately from his Thestral onto the pavement. "Never again," he said, struggling to his feet. He made as though to stride away from his Thestral, but, unable to see it, collided with its hindquarters and almost fell over again. "Never again. That was the worst." Hermione and Ginny touched down on either side of them. Both slid from their mounts a little more gracefully than Ron, though with similar expressions of relief at having been back on the firm ground. Neville jumped down, shaking, and Luna dismounted smoothly. "Where do we go from here, then?" she asked Harry in a politely interested voice, as though this was all a rather interesting day trip. "Over here," he said. He gave his Thestral a quick, grateful pat, then led the way back to the battered telephone box and opened the door. "Come on in," he urged the others as they hesitated. Ron and Ginny marched in obediently. Hermione, Neville, and Luna squashed themselves in after that. Harry took one glance back at the Thestrals, now foraging for scraps of rotten food beside the skip, then forced himself into the box after Luna. "Whoever's nearest the receiver, dial 62442, he said. Ron did it, his arm bent bizarrely to reach the dial. As it whirled back into place, the cool female voice sounded inside the box. "Welcome to the Ministry of Magic. Please state your name and business." "Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger," Harry said very quickly. "Ginny Weasley, Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood. We're here to save someone, unless your ministry can do it first." "Thank you," said the cool female voice. "Visitors, please take the badges and attach them to the front of your robes." Half a dozen badges slid out of the metal chute where coins normally appeared. Hermione scooped them up and handed them mutely to Harry over Ginny's head. He glanced at the topmost one. Harry Potter Rescue Mission. "Visitors to the Ministry, you are required to submit to a search and present your wands for registration at the security desk, which is located at the far end of the atrium." "Fine," said Harry loudly, as his scar gave another throb. "Now can we move?" The floor of the telephone box shuddered and the pavement rose up past its glass windows. The scavenging Thestrals were sliding out of sight. Blackness closed over their heads, and with a dull grinding noise they sank down into the depths of the Ministry of Magic. A chink of soft golden light hit their feet, and widening, rose up their bodies. Harry bent his knees and held his wand as ready as he could in such cramped conditions as he peered through the glass to see whether anyone was waiting for them in the atrium, but it seemed to be completely empty. The light was dimmer than it had been by day. There were no fires burning under the mantelpieces set into the walls, but as the lift slid smoothly to a halt, he saw that golden symbols continued to twist sinuously in the dark blue ceiling. "The Ministry of Magic wishes you a pleasant evening," said the woman's voice. The door of the telephone box burst open. Harry toppled out of it, followed by Luna and Neville. The only sound in the atrium was the steady rush of water from the golden fountain, where jets from the wands of the witch and wizard, the point of the centaur's arrow, the tip of the goblin's hat, and the house elf's ears continued to gush into the surrounding pool. "Come on," Harry said quietly, and the 6 of them sprinted off down the hall, Harry in the lead, past the fountain, toward the desk where the watch wizard had weighed Harry's wand had sat, and which was now deserted. Harry felt sure there ought to be a security person here, sure their absence was an ominous sign, and his feeling of foreboding increased as they passed through the golden gates to the lifts. He pressed the nearest down button, and a lift clattered into sight almost immediately. The golden grills slid apart with a great echoing clanking, and they dashed inside. Harry stabbed the number 9 button, the grills closed with a bang, and the lift began to descend, jangling and rattling. Harry had not realized how noisy the lifts were on the day he'd come with Mr. Weasley. He was sure the din would raise every security person within the building. Yet when the lift halted, the cool female voice said, "Department of Mysteries," and the grills slid open. They stepped out into the corridor where nothing was moving but the nearest torches, flickering in the rush of air from the lift. Harry turned toward the plain black door. After months and months of dreaming about it, he was here at last. "Let's go," he whispered, and he led the way down the corridor, Luna right behind him, gazing round with her mouth slightly open. "Okay, listen," said Harry, stopping again within 6 feet of the door. "Okay, maybe a couple of people should stay here as lookout. And how are we going to let you know something's coming?" Ginny asked, her eyebrows raised. "You could be miles away." "We're coming with you, Harry," said Neville. "Let's get on with it," said Ron firmly. Harry did not want to take them all with him, but it seemed he had no choice. He turned to face the door and walked forward. Just as it had in his dream, it swung open and he marched forwards, leading the others over the threshold. They were standing in a large circular room. Everything in here was black, including the floor and ceiling. Identical, unmarked, handleless black doors were set at intervals all along the black walls, interspersed with branches of candles whose flame burned blue. Their cool, shimmering light reflected in the shining marble floor made it look as though there were dark water underfoot. "Someone shut the door," Harry muttered. He regretted giving this order the moment Neville had obeyed it. Without the long chink of light from the torchlit corridor behind them, the place became so dark that for a moment the only things they could see were the bunches of shivering blue flames on the walls and their ghostly reflections in the floor. In his dream, Harry had always walked purposefully across the room to the door immediately opposite the entrance and walked in. But there were a dozen doors here. Just as he was gazing ahead at the doors opposite him, trying to decide which one was the right one, there was a great rumbling noise and the candles began to move sideways. The circular wall was rotating. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm as though frightened the floor might move too, but it did not. For a few seconds the blue flames around them were blurred to resemble neon lines as the wall sped around them. Then, quite suddenly as it had started, the rumbling stopped and everything became stationary again. Harry's eyes had blue streaks burned into them. It was all he could see. "What was that about?" whispered Ron fearfully. "I think it was to stop us knowing which door we came in through," said Ginny in a hushed voice. Harry at once realized she was right. He could no sooner identify the door than locate an ant on the jet-black floor, and the door through which they needed to proceed could be any one of the dozen surrounding them. "How are we going to get back out?" said Neville uncomfortably. "Well, that doesn't matter now," said Harry forcefully, trying to erase the blue lines from his vision, and clutching his wand tighter than ever. "We don't need to get out until we've found Sirius." "Don't go calling for him, though," Hermione said urgently, but Harry had never needed her advice less. His instinct was to keep as quiet as possible. "Where do we go then, Harry?" Ron asked. "I don't—" Harry began. He swallowed. "I went through the door at the end of the corridor from the lifts into a dark room. That's this one. Then I went through another door into a room that kind of glitters. We should try a few doors," he said hastily. "I'll know the right way when I see it. Come on." He marched straight at the door now facing him, the others following close behind, set his left hand against its cool, shining surface, raised his wand ready to strike at the moment it opened, and pushed. It swung open easily. After the darkness of the first room, the lamps hanging low and golden chains from his ceiling gave the impression that this long rectangular room was much brighter, though there were no glittering, shimmering lights as Harry had seen in his dreams. This place was quite empty except for a few desks, and in the very middle of the room, an enormous glass tank of deep green liquid, big enough for all of them to swim in. A number of pearly white objects were drifting round lazily in it. "What are those things?" whispered Ron. "Dunno," said Harry. "Are they fish?" breathed Ginny. "Aquavarius maggots," said Luna excitedly. "Dad said the Ministry were breeding." "No," said Hermione. She sounded odd. She moved forward to look through the side of the tank. "They're brains." "Brains?" "Yes. I wonder what they're doing with them." Harry joined her at the tank. Sure enough, there could be no mistake now that he saw them at close quarters. Glimmering eerily, they drifted in and out of sight in the depths of the green liquid, looking something like slimy cauliflowers. "Let's get out of here," said Harry. "This isn't right. We need to try another door." "There are doors here too," said Ron, pointing around the walls. Harry's heart sank. How big was this place? "In my dream, I went through that dark room into the second one," he said. "I think we should go back and try from there." So he hurried back into the dark circular room. The ghostly shapes of the brains were now swimming before Harry's eyes instead of the blue candle flames. "Wait!" said Hermione sharply, as Luna made to close the door of the brain room behind them. "Flagrate!" She drew her wand in mid-air, and a fiery X appeared in the door. No sooner had the door clicked shut behind them than there was a great rumbling, and once again the wall began to revolve very fast, but now there was a great red-gold blur in amongst the faint blue, and when all became still again, the fiery cross still burned, showing the door that they had just tried. "Good thinking," said Harry. "Okay, let's try this one." Again he strode directly at the door facing him and pushed it open, his wand still raised, the others at his heels. This room was larger than the last, dimly lit and rectangular, and the centre of it was sunken, forming a great stone pit some 20 feet deep. They were standing on the topmost tier of what appeared to be stone benches running all along the room and descending in steep steps like an amphitheatre, or the courtroom of which Harry had been tried by the Wizengamot. Instead of a chain chair, however, there was a raised stone dais in the centre of the pit, on which stood a stone archway that looked so ancient, cracked, and crumbling that Harry was amazed the thing was still standing. Unsupported by any surrounding wall, the archway was hung with a tattered black curtain or veil which, despite the complete stillness of the cold surrounding air, was fluttering very slightly as though it had just been touched. "Who's there?" said Harry, jumping down onto the bench below. There was no answering voice, but the veil continued to flutter and sway. "Careful!" whispered Hermione. Harry scrambled down the benches one by one until he reached the stone bottom of the sunken pit. His footsteps echoed loudly as he walked toward the dais. The pointed archway looked much taller from where he stood now than it had when he'd been looking down on it from above. Still the veil swayed gently as though somebody had just passed through it. "Sirius?" Harry spoke again, but more quietly now that he was nearer. He had the strangest feeling that someone was standing right behind the veil on the other side of the archway. Gripping his wand very tightly, he edged around the dais, but there was no one there. All that could be seen was the other side of the tattered black veil. "Let's go," said Hermione from halfway up the stone steps. "This isn't right, Harry. Come on, let's go." She sounded scared, much more scared than she had in the room where the brains swam, yet Harry thought the archway had a kind of beauty about it, old though it was. The gently rippling veil intrigued him. He felt a strong inclination to climb up on the dais and walk through it. "Harry, let's go, okay?" said Hermione more forcefully. "Okay," he said, but he didn't move. He'd just heard something. There were faint whispering, murmuring voices coming from the other side of the veil. "What are you saying?" he said very loudly, so that his words echoed all around the stone benches. "Nobody's talking, Harry," said Hermione, now moving closer to him. "Someone's whispering behind there," he said, moving out of her reach and continuing to frown at the veil. "Is that you, Ron?" "I'm here, mate," said Ron, appearing around the side of the archway. "Can't anyone else hear it?" Harry demanded, for the whispering and murmuring was becoming louder. Without really meaning to put it there, he found his foot was on the dais. "I can hear it too," breathed Luna, joining them round the side of the archway and gazing at the swaying veil. "There are people in there." "What do you mean, in there?" demanded Hermione, jumping down from the bottom step and sounding much more angrier than the occasion warranted. There isn't any in there. It's just an archway. There's no room for anyone to be in there. Harry, stop it. Come on. She grabbed his arm and pulled, but he resisted. Harry, we are supposed to be here for Sirius, she said in a high-pitched, strained voice. Sirius, Harry repeated, still gazing, mesmerized at the continuously swaying veil. Yeah. Something finally slid back into place in his brain. Sirius. Captured, bound, and tortured, and he was staring at this archway. He took several paces back from the dais and wrenched his eyes from the veil. Let's go, he said. That's what I've been trying to... Well, come on then, said Hermione, and she led the way back round the dais. On the other side, Ginny and Neville were staring, apparently entranced at the veil too. Without speaking, Hermione took hold of Ginny's arms, Ron grabbed Neville's, and they marched them firmly back to the lowest stone bench and clambered all the way back up the door. What do you reckon that arch was? Harry asked Hermione as they regained the dark circular room. I don't know, but whatever it was dangerous, she said firmly, again inscribing a fiery cross on the door. Once more the wall spun and became still again. Harry approached another room at random and pushed. It did not move. What's wrong? Said Hermione. It's locked, Harry said, throwing his weight at the door, but it didn't budge. This is it then, isn't it? Said Ron excitedly, joining Harry in an attempt to force the door open. Bound to be. Get out of the way, said Hermione sharply. She pointed her wand at the place where a lock would have been on an ordinary door and said, Alohomora. Nothing happened. Sirius's knife, said Harry. He pulled it out from inside his robes and slid it into the crack between the door and the wall. The others watched eagerly as he ran it from top to bottom, withdrew it, and then flung his shoulder again at the door. It remained as firmly shut as ever. What was more, when Harry looked down at the knife, he saw the blade had melted. Right, we're leaving that room, said Hermione decisively. But what if that's the one? Said Ron, staring at it with a mixture of apprehension and longing. It can't be. Harry could get through all the doors in his dream, said Hermione, marking the door with another fiery cross as Harry replaced the now useless handle of Sirius's knife in his pocket. You know what could be in there? Said Luna as the wall started to spin again. Something blibbering, no doubt, said Hermione under her breath, and Neville gave a nervous little laugh. The wall slid to a halt, and Harry, with a feeling of increasing desperation, pushed through the next open door. This is it! He knew it at once by the beautiful, dancing, diamond-sparkling light. As Harry's eyes became accustomed to the brilliant glare, he saw clocks gleaming from every surface, large and small, grandfather and carriage, hanging in spaces between the bookcases or standing on desks ranging the length of the room, so that a busy, relentless ticking filled the place like thousands of minuscule marching footsteps. The source of the dancing, diamond-bright light was a towering crystal bell-jar that stood at the very end of the room. This way! Harry's heart was pumping frantically now that he knew they were on the right track. He led the way down the narrow space between the lines of desks, heading, as he had done in the dream, for the source of the light. The crystal bell-jar, quite as tall as he was, that stood on a desk, appeared to be full of a billowing, glittering wind. Oh, look, said Ginny as they drew nearer, pointing at the very heart of the bell-jar. Drifting along in the sparkling current was a tiny, jewelled, bright egg. As it rose in the air, it cracked open, and a hummingbird emerged, which was carried to the very top of the jar. But as it fell on the draught, its feathers became bedraggled and damp again, and by the time it had been borne back to the bottom of the jar, it had been enclosed once more in the egg. Keep going, said Harry sharply, because Ginny showed signs of wanting to stop and watch the egg's progress back into a bird. You dawdled long enough by that old arch, she said crossly, but followed past the bell-jar, to the only door behind it. This is it, Harry said again, and his heart was now pumping so hard and fast he felt it must interfere with his speech. It's through here. He glanced around at all of them. They had their wands out and looked suddenly serious and anxious. He looked back at the door and pushed. It swung open. They were there. They had found the place. High as a church and full of nothing but towering shelves covered in small, dusty glass orbs. They glimmered dully in the light, issuing from more candle brackets set at intervals along the shelves. Like those in the circular room behind them, their flames were burning blue. The room was very old. Harry edged forward and peered down into one of the shadowy aisles between two rows of shelves. He could not hear anything or see the slightest sign of movement. You said it was row 97, whispered Hermione. Yeah, breathed Harry, looking down at the end of the closest row. Beneath a branch of blue glowing candles protruding from it glimmered the silver figure 53. "We need to go right, I think," whispered Hermione, squinting to the next row. "Yes, that's 54. "Keep your wands ready," Harry said softly. They crept forward, glancing behind them as they went down the long alleys of shelves, the further ends of which were in near total darkness. Tiny yellowing labels had been stuck beneath each glass orb on the shelves. Some of them had a weird liquid glow, others were as dull and dark within as blown light bulbs. They passed row 84, 85. Harry was listening for the slightest sound of movement, but Sirius must be gagged now or somehow unconscious. Or, said an unbidden voice inside his head, he might already be dead. "I'd have felt it," he told himself, his heart now hammering against his Adam's apple. "I'd already know. 97! They stood grouped round the end of the row, gazing down the alley beside it. There was no one there. "He's right down at the end," said Harry, whose mouth had become slightly dry. "You can't see properly from here." And he led them between the towering rows of glass balls, some of which glowed softly as they passed. "He should be near here," whispered Harry, convinced that every step was going to bring the ragged form of Sirius into view on the darkened floor. "Anywhere here, really close." "Harry?" said Hermione tentatively, but he did not want to respond. His mouth was very dry. "Somewhere about here," he said. They reached the end of the row and emerged into more dim candlelight. There was no one there. All was echoing dusty silence. "Oh, he might be," Harry whispered hoarsely, peering down the next alley. "Or maybe—" He hurried to look down the one beyond it. "Harry?" said Hermione again. "What?" he snarled. I don't think Sirius is here." Nobody spoke. Harry did not want to look at any of them. He felt sick. He did not understand why Sirius wasn't here. He had to be here. This is where he, Harry, had seen him. He ran up the space at the end of the row, staring down them. Empty aisle after empty aisle flickered past. He ran the other way, back past his staring companions. There was no sign of Sirius anywhere, or any hint of a struggle. "Harry!" Ron called. "What?" He did not want to hear what Ron had to say, did not want to hear Ron tell him that he'd been stupid, or suggest they ought to go back to Hogwarts, but the heat was rising in his face, and he felt as though he would like to skulk in the darkness for a while before facing the brightness of the atrium above and the others' accusing stares. "Have you seen this?" said Ron. "What?" said Harry, but eagerly this time. It had to be a sign that Sirius had been here, a clue. He strode over to where they were all standing, a little way down row 97, but found nothing except Ron staring at one of the dusty glass spheres on the shelf. "What?" Harry repeated glumly. It's got your name on," said Ron. Harry moved a little closer. Ron was pointing at one of the small glass spheres that glowed with a dull inner light, though it was very dusty and appeared not to have been touched for many years. "My name?" Harry said blankly. He stepped forward. Not as tall as Ron, he had to crane his neck to read the yellowish label affixed to the shelf beneath the dusty glass ball. In spidery writing was written a date of some 16 years previously, and before that, SPT to APWBD, Dark Lord and Harry Potter. Harry stared at it. "What is it?" Ron asked, sounding unnerved. "What's your name doing down here?" He glanced along at the other labels on that stretch of shelf. "I'm not here," he said, sounding perplexed. "None of the rest of us are here." "Harry, I don't think you should touch it," said Hermione sharply as he stretched out his hand. "Why not?" he said. "It's something to do with me, isn't it?" "Don't, Harry!" said Neville suddenly. Harry looked at him. Neville's round face was shining slightly with sweat. He looked as though he could not take much more suspense. "It's got my name on." And feeling slightly reckless, he closed his fingers round the dusty ball's surface. He'd expected it to feel cold, but it did not. On the contrary, it felt as though it had been lying in the sun for hours, as though the glow of light within was warming it. Expecting, even hoping, that something dramatic was going to happen, something exciting that might make their long and dangerous journey worthwhile after all, Harry lifted the glass ball down from its shelf and stared at it. Nothing happened. Nothing whatsoever. The others moved in closer around Harry, gazing at the orb as he brushed it free of the clogging dust. And then, from right behind them, a drawling voice spoke. Very good, Potter. Now turn around nice and slowly and give that to me.
I was almost right. Just wasn't Voldemort.
Just wasn't. Darn, it wasn't Voldemort.
I know. That's why you should have learned occlumency.
Who is it?
Sounded like Malfoy. Did Draco follow them? I'm gonna say it was Draco.
What if it's Lucius?
It might be, but no. I think
it's Draco?
they got Draco in the Death Eater action.
Oh, you think Draco's in the Death Eater club?
Oh yeah, 100%.
he
Him,
got a-
Crab, Goyle, all of them, I
Does he
think,
have
are
a-
in it.
Dark mark yet?
I don't know. Maybe this is like his
Initiation.
initiation. I was gonna say inauguration. No.
So what is that thing?
The weapon.
It's got Harry's name on it.
And Voldemort's.
Mm-hmm. SPT to ABW. What the hell were those initials? Or whatever they are. APWBD.
ABW. BD.
PD. Yeah. SPT to APWBD. The Dark Lord and question mark Harry Potter.
Yes, that is. Superpower transitioned against will. I don't know.
It's so obvious to me now, but I feel like when I read the first book, when I read this for the first time, I was just like, what? What? That's the cover of the American edition, is him standing in the room with all the candles and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember that cover.
What about all the other rooms? Like the room with the brains in it? What are they doing?
Yeah, that's some weird stuff. Or what is on the other side of the veil?
Well, the next chapter is called Beyond the Veil.
Oh.
Ah!
Maybe it just kills you.
Oh, shit! Maybe it just kills you.
Like the whispers you hear, all the souls it trapped or something.
Like it's just a bunch of dead people in there.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's
that's-
a euthanasia machine.
It's a euthanasia machine. The wizard version of it.
Yes, exactly.
It's actually not a bad theory, because that would explain how Luna could hear them and Harry can't. Or Luna and Harry can hear them and the other ones can't. You know? Because
But Ginny-
they can also see the Thestrals.
Yeah, but it doesn't really add up because Ginny could hear them too.
Oh, could she?
Yeah.
Oh.
Neville and Ginny were staring at it. Ginny was the one that kind of broke it.
That's right. Hermione knew right out of the gate. There's something wrong with this thing. Don't go over there.
Well, I mean, they just walked into a room with a bunch of brains and a vat, so there's going to be some messed up things. I would just assume everything down there is messed up.
Right, the Department of Mysteries. What are they doing?
Science.
In secret. They don't want everyone else to know they're doing actual scientific experiments.
Exactly. That's kind of what I pictured the whole brain thing is.
Yeah, what are they doing with those? Where'd they get those brains?
I don't know.
Are they human?
Past ministry officials, you know how Creature's family, their head gets hung up on the wall. Do they just take
The brains out
the
of
brains?
like the department heads when they pass away or something?
They're stocking up for the zombie invasion.
What do you think the weapon is?
You
You have no clue, right?
No. Nope. Not an idea.
So where's Sirius?
That I don't know. I think Voldemort has him.
You do think Voldemort does have Sirius?
Yeah. I think Sirius snuck out. Voldemort got him, and then Voldemort just used his occlumency to...
It's legilimency. To paint a picture for Harry.
Yeah.
To get Harry...
Inception style.
To get Harry to pull the weapon off the shelf.
Voldemort played Leonardo DiCaprio this evening. You still haven't seen that movie, have you?
No.
You gotta watch that.
I'm just picturing... You said Leonardo DiCaprio, and it's terrible, but the first thing I picture is Voldemort at the top of the Titanic screaming, "I'm the king of the world!"
Harry coming up behind him.
Oh, that's uncomfortable. Maybe not Harry.
Oh, there you go, for any of your next fan fictions out there.
Titanic, where Voldemort is Leonardo DiCaprio.
And Harry is Rose.
No! God, that's so wrong.
Yeah, that would be. Lucius Malfoy is Rose.
Dear Jesus! Oh, man, okay. Oh.
Oh, that... Now I wonder, could Voldemort freeze and drown to death? Would Lucius do that to Voldemort? Kick him off the raft? The door?
I feel like Voldemort would drag Lucius off of it and take the door for himself. I don't think Lucius would end up having much of a choice. I think Voldemort would make his ass get off it and then let Lucius drown.
Move over, Lucius.
There's
not enough room.
There's no room, my lord.
You're right. Crucio.
That's...
Oh, look. Now there's room. Yeah, I kind of see that happening. But yeah, I don't know.
Narcissa and Draco are safe because women and children first, and they were rich, so they got a lifeboat.
That's true.
Narcissa and Draco would be okay. The Weasleys, though, I don't know. They were down
but
in...
Voldemort was too busy painting Lucius down in the cabins.
That's right. The Weasleys, though, I don't know. They'd have been in steerage where they have gotten, like, stuck behind the... When they lock everybody in there, but they've got stuck.
Maybe. I don't even think Arthur would care. He'd just be marveling at everything.
The entire time. Even before...
Muggles built this.
Molly, look, this is fascinating. Arthur, we're going to drown! I know, but look!
He'd just be going through everyone's luggage.
Oh, yeah. All the rooms. Everything. He'd be the engine room.
Arthur, what are you doing? We're gonna drown anyways, Molly.
Imagine Arthur's face if he saw the engine room of that place.
I know. That would be insane. I actually saw a show where they took you to, like, the largest combustion engine.
Yeah.
And it's in a ship. And you can literally, like, walk in
the engine.
to the... Yeah. Like, for one piston is, like, the size of your standard living room. You can, like, walk in and stand up.
That's very large.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think Arthur would be quite amazed.
I think Arthur would have the time of his life. So what do you think's going to happen next chapter? In Beyond the Veil.
Well, I'm going to say Draco, and if he has anyone else, is going to Sparta kick them through the veil, and we're going to find out what it is.
Ah, I see. All right. Any other thoughts?
I think that's all I got. It's early. I'm tired.
Wait, so... If Voldemort survived the Titanic, does that mean he's like the really, really old lady narrating the story?
Yes.
Like that role?
Yes.
It's been 84 years. And I can still smell the fresh paint on the walls
Of the Chamber of Secrets. It almost has been 80 years. I mean, 50 and then, yeah.
I mean, Voldemort is like 70
Mm-hmm.
at this point. He's like 70, 71. I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's like 70.
He's an old gent.
Although very spry for an old man, I'll tell you. It's weird to think that Voldemort is 70. I don't ever think of him being that old. But he is. It every time I think about it, I'm just like, oh yeah, Voldemort's like 70.
Now I just picture this whole book is like Voldemort is the old man. Get off my lawn, you kids!
Harry Potter, get away from my front porch!
You drop that sorcerer's stone right now, youngin'. Respect your elders.
Yeah, he just doesn't come across as old, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Dumbledore does, but I guess
I feel like Dumbledore aged a little bit better.
well, as we shall see in the next book, there's a reason why Voldemort is the way he is.
So yeah, he mentioned it in the last book that he spent his entire life trying to achieve immortality and did all these crazy things to himself.
And you will find them out
Okay.
in the next book.
Okay.
And it's that's all I got for that. It's anyway. Are we done going off on random tangents
I think so.
of the greatest love story ever told?
I mean, I could go off on tangents all day long, but
the epic love story of Voldemort and Lucius Malfoy aboard the RMS Titanic.
maybe that should be your fan fiction you've been talking about writing.
Lucius Malfoy.
Yes.
Voldemort. The Titanic version. That would be pretty great. That would be pretty great. What if it was Snape and Sirius?
It's where it all began.
That's why they really hate each other, because Snape survived after Sirius wouldn't let him on the raft. Or vice versa, whatever. I feel like it
Snape, there wasn't enough room. Yes, there was.
You could have turned into a dog and made more space, and you didn't.
Or maybe Snape and Lupin.
George's favorite couple. Snape and Lupin. God, being on that raft would be so the wrong time to turn into a werewolf.
Oh, there you go. That's why he hates... that's why he hates Sirius. Sirius wouldn't let him on the raft, or the door, so he sent him over to Lupin's door, and Lupin turned just then.
Maybe I should just write Titanic Hogwarts edition and just throw all the characters in there. Just do it.
There you go.
We put Lily and James in there somewhere too.
Oh, jeez.
They'll just die somewhere during the event. They'll just die somehow. That's terrible. Why did I say that? You know,
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
You know, it was, though, my instant thought was maybe it would be one of the smokestacks just comes down on the two of them. And that's it. I don't know why. It's just
that's awful.
I know, it's terrible. My brain is awful.
Is Harry gonna be there and, like, witness this?
I don't know. I feel like no.
Okay.
I feel like this would have to be like an explanation story of why everyone hates each other and loves each other.
Dumbledore could be the captain. If you would all please go to the lifeboats. We are now sinking.
There is nothing to fear. Everything will be fine. Please just don't panic. Fawkes is not large enough to carry all of us.
Fudge is just there as the boat's falling apart. Everything's fine. Don't worry. Just go back to your cabins. Everything's okay.
We are not sinking. Dumbledore is out of his mind. It's just a tiny leak. It'll be fine.
The hull is cracking in two.
No, it's not. No, it's not. That's just
settling.
That's just Dumbledore making you think you're seeing things that you're not.
The ship was designed to do that.
It's supposed to leak a little bit. For balance. Oh my god. Anyway, please join us next time for Chapter 35, Beyond the Veil. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Can end with Dumbledore just riding on top of the giant squid across the sea.